All right, and I'm hitting the record button manually this time, so I know that it will record. Go ahead.
All right. My name is David McNeil, and I'm doing mine over the emotional contagion unethical limit that Facebook had back in a couple years ago, and the data just finally resurfaced not that long ago. So what happened was Facebook, their administrators, and some Princeton University technical guys who knew some of the Facebook administrators worked together, and they created a research study that they passed out to they underwent about 700,000 Facebook users, and you yourself probably could have been in that 700,000. It all depends. So what they did is they were to take out, they had an algorithm, and the algorithm was going to either take out or or include more positive Facebook feeds, or take out some negative feeds. So if it had certain words in it, it would take out those certain posts. So usually you have to have an implied consent form in order to be a part of any sort of research study. So people can't just do certain research whatever they feel like onto you. So it was made legal because when you sign up for Facebook, you read the data use policy, like the 300-page policy that no one ever reads. It is very vaguely written in there that they can use the information that Facebook collects depending on if it's supposed to increase Facebook's profitability or improve their site. So about 3 million people, a little over 3 million people were, 3 million posts were scanned, and on a very small effect, the end result was noted. So about 1/15%, if someone were to, if the algorithm was used on you and included or not included the Facebook feeds that had good or bad algorithm results on it, it only had a small effect of about 1/15%. It didn't have that much of course, the sample wasn't very big, but they only noticed less than 1%. So you wouldn't have really seen that much of a difference. So it kind of depends on a quote that I saw that I liked after reading this was you would need to write a couple thousand words before you use one more awesome in your status update. That would make a difference. So how they got away with it is they told the users that they'll use any and all information, like I stated earlier. Pretty much, it's just like the data collection policy Facebook has. They can use anything they like as long as it benefits them. The research was not used once in their data. So it was a research development activity that they were doing, and even though it was a research study, research was not found one time in the fair use data policy, which is how they got away with doing this. They need to have, so the informed consent was very vague, like I stated earlier as well. In international law, it's called the common rule. You're supposed to have informed consent on anything, any sort of research activity you do. A little history. So in the 1970s, we created the Institutional Review Board. So any sort of research activity that goes through has to go through some sort of review board. So if y'all take psychology back in the day where people, the scientist was told a person to press this button, if you press this button you'll shock the person, and eventually he shocked him to death. Well, that happened before the review boards. Since then, about the 70s, they have to go through some sort of ethics review board in order for that research study to get approved. And surprisingly, so it did get passed. This research, it did get passed through an ethical review board, but it did not get. They didn't have any issues when they reviewed it, so it got passed through, which surprised a lot of people. But the ethical issues that arise with this journal is about private companies and corporations sharing data with research institutions for scientific study. It's kind of unfair for the scientific institutions to receive monetary value from this. So in their Facebook terms of service is so vague that they can basically claim to do whatever they like. It's kind of like buying a Sony TV and having Cox determine what you watch. It's kind of the same thing. They'll let you use the site, but they kind of do with it whatever the information they receive, however they like. And the third one is they should have a dual form of consent to make sure that they know what they are signing up for. So something that could have arose from this was if someone's depressed, if they have the feelings of depression, that's not triggered unless they see a certain post or something online. It could have triggered that person to an emotional instability. So there were some sort of risks that were involved in this study that Facebook could have been held liable for. But thankfully that did not happen. So the conclusion, Facebook didn't act in just with utilitarian ethics, which is the greatest happiness principle. So they stated that they were trying to improve their own company, but in the end result, it's more like they violated more than 700,000 people's trust because they never know when they're going to do some sort of research study. And because everyone uses Facebook, so of course they can use whatever they like. Facebook needs to have a less vague consent form and a more descriptive fair data use policy to get implied consent. And finally, they were found just in doing so with what they did because they can do, if you use their website, of course, they can do with it whatever they like.
Any questions? Not surprisingly, I have questions. All right, so first of all, let's go to you're talking about informed consent. What constitutes informed consent?
Both parties consenting to it, but having one party informed and in good state of mind, rational thinking, and knows what he's doing.
Okay, so you said, let me see. What do you think the elements of informed consent are?
Being of sound body and mind, still, and I guess that kind of covers everything. And just know what you're doing, and have both consenting parties consent.
The what?
Well, having both parties consent to it.
Really, you think the party that's administering? I mean, isn't it given that they've consented? That if you have a two-party exchange and one is using the information, isn't it given that they've consented to the? I mean, isn't that that's a tautology? So you're saying sound mind and awareness. Okay. So I guess that goes to the knowing aspect. I think what I told you in this class that you probably should have said is that informed consent, or whether or not the will is overborne, consists of three things. That it is knowing, that's that you're awake and conscious, that you know what you're doing. I guess you know what you're doing when you click on the thing. That it's voluntary, nobody coerced you. Now that one gets somewhat more difficult with regard to these kinds of issues. Was this voluntary? Or is this what we call a contract of adhesion, in which you either agree or you don't get the benefit?
Oh, it's exactly like that. It's like you go into apply for a job, and the job says, hey, you have to take a drug test before you get hired on. And,
right.
Well, I don't want to take a drug test before you don't get hired on.
Right, yeah. So, I mean, I think that there's an issue with the voluntariness of this, in that, can you live without Facebook today? How many of you have a Facebook account? Anybody not have a Facebook account? Anyone not? Okay, can you all live without Facebook? All right. Is it intelligent?
Yes.
You think it's an intelligent choice when you click on all that stuff that you didn't read?
Oh, no, absolutely not. I thought you meant the website. I said, yeah, well, it's data mining the entire time you're on it, but you don't even have to have a Facebook for it to
data mine. No,
yeah,
they have 75,000 data points on the average individual, whether or not they have a Facebook account or not.
Which
right?
I think that in itself is wrong. As long as you signed up for Facebook, should you be on board with their data mining program?
You give all that information out to the public. I mean, could they get any of that information? I mean, could any member of the public get that information if they wanted it?
I guess, yeah.
Yeah, they can. I mean, the information that Facebook data mines, they can get from publicly available sources. That's how they get 75,000 data points, even if you don't have a Facebook account. It's stuff that you give away freely. Well, not freely. You have to file your deed to your home with the county clerk in your county that registers that you own the property. All of that's publicly available information. Driver's license information, arrests, things like that. All of that's publicly available, right? So do you have? I mean, should you have should you be able to opt out of Facebook and say, no, you can't collect that data on me?
I would think so.
The Europeans are starting to say maybe you can. America's kind of says, no, you can't. I mean, can you look, how many of you have done this? How many of you have gone on OSCN to creep on your friends and see if they have, huh?
Oklahoma State County Court.
Oklahoma Supreme Court Network. You can look up anybody's name and find all the court records on them. How many of you have done that? It's probably a good idea before you go on a date with somebody. Just get on there. It's a free background search, right? So all of this is publicly available information. Do you think, so you talked about the need for IRB approval. Don't you think that IRB approval is really taken to it? I mean, I think we all understand the reason that we have IRB. By the way, the research, you made a mistake. What they said is they had a psychological test set up. They never killed anybody in the test.
I'm sorry, yeah.
They said that-
They thought they killed him.
Right, they thought. And it created
Sorry, yeah.
extreme emotional distress
Yeah.
in the person that was shocking. They didn't kill anybody. That would be murder and that would obviously be wrong. But they wanted to see if they could get people basically to act just by authoritarian principles. Now, we all sit there and say, well, it caused these people distress, but how do you calculate the benefit of that? What do we know about human behavior as a result of that? Okay, so it's not just, there's a whole reason we have IRB. That was one reason. Another reason was called the Tuskegee study, where they basically had taken a group of African American men who were infected with syphilis, and they just watched them to see what happens if you don't give people treatment. We learned an enormous amount from that study that we benefited from. How do you do the calculus? In that you took a very small population, you mistreated that population, but there were overwhelmingly positive benefits. A lot of us, particularly those of us who are duty ethicists, would say, that's just wrong, right? We learned an enormous amount from the scientific experiments that were done on twins in the Nazi death camps. But a lot of us would just say, that's creepy. But is this, so I think we have those cases where we say, that's creepy. But really, on the other end, I mean, based on utilitarian principle, you're giving this information to them. Does anybody in here who has a Facebook account think that any of that information is private? Do any of you have any delusion that it's private? If you do, you haven't been around very long. So how do we, so we get a lot of benefit out of this information. And wouldn't it be more of a hindrance to notify there's a blanket thing. You agree that we can use this information for any and all purposes that will benefit us. You don't like it? Do what? Yeah, get off Facebook. Right?
We're still taking your information regardless.
Well, that's all publicly available information.
I'm aware, I'm just saying, if they're gonna collect it anyways, then what's the point of not adding it to Facebook?
I don't know. I don't know how you do the utilitarian analysis on this. They violated 700,000 people's trust. Do any of those 700,000 really think that they weren't violating their, I think the bigger issue with Facebook is when they do things like they reset all of the privacy settings and people get found out. Because they've done that once. They updated their code and, it just reset everybody's privacy settings back to default, and what happened? People who thought things were private, all of a sudden, there was a teacher, actually a principal, who lost her job because she referred to her children as little disease bags. Her elementary school children as nothing but little disease bags in a post on Facebook. And the parents saw it after it was not, set to private anymore, and but in reality, should she have, don't post things like that, right? The fact that she thought it was private sort of speaks to maybe, but I don't know. All right. Any questions from anybody else? Good job. Good topic. All right. Turn that